Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal list of Brahms orchestral music. Now, I know we did the best Brahms symphony cycles and all that, but I figured as long as I'm going to make this list, and there are only 4 Brahms symphonies, we might as well toss in the rest of the orchestral works, or at least accept the concertos. So we're going to do the symphonies, the serenades, the overtures, and the Haydn Variations, the ideal list of all of these. That'll give a little extra interest to this particular chat. And, Brahms is been done so often by so many people, and I never tire of saying, just because I choose these as an ideal list, what that means is that there are no weak links. All of the performances are superb. That doesn't mean there aren't millions of other superb performances, or even that these are necessarily my first choice as the best, because we all know what the best is depends on your mood. It depends on how you feel. It depends on what else you have sitting around. It depends on who your friends are, what side of the bed you got up on. There are lots of bests, aren't there? So I'm not going to sweat which is the absolute best. It's a nonsensical concept, even though I like to use it because it's kind of fun and provocative, and it gets people talking, which is part of the fun of this, that we all have these chats. But these are all great performances, and so when you put them together, you wind up with a list that is ideal. It has no weak links. And with that said, let's get started right away with the first symphony. We're going to do the symphonies first. Number 1, this is such an easy call. Klemperer. It's got to be. It's got to be Klemperer. Well, it doesn't really have to be Klemperer. There we go, Klemperer. But it's better if it is Klemperer. Brahms First is such a big, granitic, as we always say when we talk about Klemperer, massive piece of music. And there's a tendency today, especially thanks to the period instrument folks, to play it in a much quicker, more light and lively fashion. Everyone says, the opening is only marked poco sostenuto, a little sustained. So why should we be pounding away at it like the crack of doom? Well, the reason is because it sounds damn good when you pound away at it like the crack of doom. I like the crack of doom. And if you want a crack of doom, Klemperer, excuse me, is your crack of doom guy. It's a knockout of a performance of absolute strength and majesty and power. And, come on, that's what you want in this symphony, isn't it? Now, Symphony number 2 is just the opposite. It's light, it's pastoral, it's charming, although it has some really crunching dissonances in the first movement, especially in the development section. And the slow movement is my God, it's the model for everything Elgar did in that department, isn't it? I mean, it has that wonderful theme with the cellos, and it's gorgeous. Anyway, the performance I choose for the second symphony is the only mono one in the bunch, but it's in good mono. It sounds wonderful, and it's Bruno Walter with the New York Philharmonic. Why? Because not only did he always do a fabulous second symphony, but the finale is the most exciting ever done. Period. No one is better. Boy, he takes that accelerando towards the end, which is sort of implied but not really written, and they just play the living daylights out of it. It's so exciting. And, I want a second symphony that rises to that level of physical excitement. In fact, this ideal list is sort of a physical list. There's not a lot of spirituality in this particular compilation of my ideal symphonies. I want power and energy and vitality, and that's what I'm looking for in these performances. Third symphony. We're moving quickly here because we all know this stuff. We've done it before. For the third symphony, I choose Günter Wand and the NDR Symphony Orchestra, his first recording. Now, normally I probably would have picked Walter also with the Columbia Symphony, who does a great third. But here's the thing. Günter Wand gives you the exposition repeat in the first movement, which I really like in the third. I've already used Walter, and I want to do separate people for each work, and we're going to. Separate conductors all the way through. And this performance of the third is the most structurally cogent, and in the finale, really pedal to the metal, brilliant, exciting, but smart, just a smart performance. Incredibly well paced and beautifully controlled, but with lots and lots, as I said, of power and energy, and a finale, a coda to the finale that is so inevitable and natural. It's just magnificent. So, Günter Wand in the third, his first recording with NDR, he redid it, and it didn't come out quite as well. It's so often the case, isn't it? You know, you can't repeat every success. You just can't. Sometimes there are other factors that determine how wonderfully it goes. And this is one of those performances where everything just went well. And now we come to the fourth. And this one, I think, is going to surprise you a little bit, because my choice is Stokowski. Leopold Stokowski, believe it or not, you know, on RCA. It's like one of the last recordings he ever made. Maybe it was the last one. He was about 250 when he did it. And of course, he knew Brahms and discussed it with Brahms. I'm just kidding. He might as well have known Brahms. He was around when Brahms was around. And he spent a lot of time doing Brahms symphonies. And a lot of Stokowski's Brahms performances were really perverse. I mean, demented. His third was like, whoa, my God, it was unbelievably bad. It got my vote for worst ever recording of the third. But this fourth is amazing. It's just amazing. I like it because it's fast. I have to be honest. The tempi are swift all the way through. There is no dawdling, none of that sort of creaky German. It sounds new. It sounds fresh. It sounds young. It never sounds tired. Even the concluding movement, the Passacaglia, which can be a little bit kind of Baroque and creaky in places. I mean, it just moves, and the end is exciting as hell. My God. He takes again. There's a più allegro towards the end, and boy, is it più. I mean, they just go for it. It's so terrific. And a wonderful performance. He doesn't mess with the orchestration. He doesn't make cuts and rearrangements and do all the usual Stokowskiisms. It's just incredibly vital. And, it's such a novel thing in the Fourth Symphony. You know, there's a tendency to want to make it sort of elegiac and gaunt and austere. Not here. I mean, it's like the work of a composer 40 years younger than Brahms was when he wrote it. And that's why I love it. It's a great, almost completely unknown version of the fourth. It never gets any acclaim. One of you mentioned it in the comments when we talked about Brahms symphony cycles. I was very proud of you for doing that, because it is a great Brahms Fourth. It's Leopold Stokowski. I mean, it just blows my mind. What orchestra is it? I mean, I don't even know. I'm not even looking. Was it with the London Symphony? Let's take a look. I'm just curious here. Hang on a minute. It's CD number 12. Okay, looks like it's in this RCA Stokowski box. And I'm going to take a peek just for the fun of it. Oh, here it is. New Philharmonia. It's with the New Philharmonia, and my gosh, what a great performance it is. You really owe it to yourself to hear it. It will change your view of what the fourth can be. Now, let's move on from the symphonies and talk about the Haydn Variations. The Haydn Variations. Beautiful work. Everyone and their mother does it. I mean, what is there to say? You want to have each variation wonderfully well characterized, and you want the conclusion, which is also a Passacaglia, like the finale of the fourth, a series of variations over a ground bass. You want it to build to a really powerful conclusion, and you want to hear a little bit of happiness. There's a triangle part in this piece. Ooh, percussion. Joachim, the greatest Brahms conductor of the middle part of the 20th century that no one ever pays attention to. No one gives him as much credit as he deserves. And this also comes with an absolutely fabulous Enigma Variations, one of the great performances of that. But this is an astoundingly wonderful Haydn Variations, one that makes it really a thing by itself, worth listening to, not just an appendage to the Brahms orchestral works. The Haydn Variations, again, they're played so often, they're so familiar, we don't pay a lot of attention to them. But when really great performances come along, I mean, and there are quite a few, it's been done very well. but we don't talk about it much. It's a work that gets taken for granted. It's a filler. It's a filler on, cycles of the symphonies. It's a filler in concert programs because it's only about 20 minutes long. It's like a big overture, really. But what a wonderful work it is. And Joachim is the guy who shows you just how expressively marvelous it can be. Again, it makes you listen to the work afresh, to give it a chance to hear it with all prior assumptions you make about the work banished. You just sit and listen as if it's new, and that's how it strikes you. And actually, coming now that I think about it, in a way, that's what all of these performances, I think, have in common. They have this sense of making you listen to the music from scratch, all of them, even Klemperer's First, a performance in a style that we think we know. But when you listen to it and you pay attention to it and you don't do other things like read a book or have a snack or go to the bathroom while it's going on, you hear the music as if something you've never heard before. And that's what I want in these performances. Maybe that's what sort of motivated me to put this list together. So now let's talk about the Serenades. In my talk about the first Serenade, my favorite, and I pointed this out, was Haydn with the Concertgebouw. A gorgeous performance, but that's not the one I chose for this ideal list. For this ideal list, I chose Bělohlavek with the Czech Philharmonic. And the reason is because this Serenade, one of Brahms's earliest orchestral works, and it's the one where, in both these Serenades, he sort of learned how to deal with woodwinds. And when you talk about woodwinds, you want to hear the Czech Philharmonic do something. Now, you get both Serenades on this disc, and they're both marvelous. But I chose the first particularly. I want to play you the opening because I have permission to use these recordings. Wait till you hear the opening. Listen just to the clarinet and then the oboe, and you'll know why this has to be one of the great, great versions of the Serenades. Listen to this. See what I mean? How much character, how much personality. Isn't it just marvelous? It's incredible. It's beautiful. And so that is one of my ideal performances of Serenade number 1. Now, Serenade number 2. Serenade number 2, as you know, has no violins. It's the work that features the woodwind section more than almost any other. And I have to say, there are many, many choices in the second Serenade. No one cares about the second Serenade. It's such a lovely work. I think the problem with it is it has this big, long, slow movement that can really hang fire in most performances. It can really die. But it's just a lovely piece. It's got an adorable piccolo part in the finale. I go for Macaris. Macaris because he's such a great Mozartian. He did amazing recordings of the Mozart wind serenades. And this has just that kind of Mozartian character. Wonderful, wonderful wind playing from the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, lively tempos, heartfelt, expressive, but also classical. It has that classical poise that you want to hear in this particular work. And, again, how often do we listen to the second Serenade? Sit down, listen to it, folks. Give it a shot. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful work, and I'm so happy that I could include it now in this list. Maybe at some point we'll do a talk just on the second Serenade, so we can walk our way through it and hear just how remarkable and wonderful a piece it is. Now, we come to the 2 overtures, the Academic Festival and the Tragic. Academic Festival. Again, this was an easy call for me. It really was. And the performance I chose is Bernstein in the New York Philharmonic. Why? Because the piece is just a good time. And nobody did a rollicking good time better than Bernstein. When he was on there, he could put more juice into a piece of music. And again, this is a piece that, because it's called academic, there's a tendency to treat it in this kind of fusty, uninteresting way. But this is a performance that really raises the roof, and that's what you want to have happen here. I mean, Brahms is letting his hair down, both of them, or his beard, or whatever he let down. And it's just great to hear a performance that's completely uninhibited, throws caution to the breeze, and just lets the thing sing the way it's supposed to, right? I mean, isn't that what's supposed to happen in this piece? And I have a Brahms Academic Festival horror story for you that's really funny. Back when I was in college, and I was running a WJHU at Johns Hopkins University. I was director of classical programming at the radio station. Now it's part of Maryland Public Radio. Back then, we were a small station, and we were going to start initiating the transfer to an adult part of the NPR network. But we were just having a good time, and I was going to play the Academic Festival Overture, which never really made much of an impression on me, I have to confess. And I had a recording. It was actually with Zubin Mehta in the New York Philharmonic. And I put it on. We had turntables. Remember turntables? This was before CDs. We had records and turntables. And I put it on, and I thought, gee, this is really exciting. This is so lively. It's so different from what I'm used to hearing. I couldn't imagine why it sounded just so good and why I'd never really paid attention to the work before and didn't really care about it. Then I realized I played the whole thing at 45 RPM. Oops. And never noticed. Oops. It happens in the old radio business, you know? Stuff like that happened when you had LPs. But boy, it sounds really good at 45 RPM. I got to tell you, it really does. It sounded much better than it did at 33. Well, Bernstein's is a performance where, you know, you can play it at 33 RPM, 33 and a third, and it still sounds great. And that's the point. That is absolutely the point. Finally, we come to the tragic overture. Now, the tragic overture has got a lot of really dull performances. It's a tough piece to do. It's a very tough piece to do. You know, it doesn't really always sound that tragic. It's turbulent and stormy, but tragic, you know, the crack of doom. Remember, we already talked about the crack of doom in the First Symphony? Well, we want an even bigger crack in the tragic overture. And it's a piece that so often falls flat. It really does. And I've picked a performance of real interpretive daring, and I think risk-taking. I really do. And that is, and again, I'm going to play you a little bit of it, Anne Churl with the Czech Philharmonic again. You know, it's not because of the woodwind section here. It's because of Anne Churl, who was just an amazing conductor and stuff like this. And this is the most tragic performance of the tragic overture I've ever heard. I mean, tragic in a good sense. It has that inevitable, monolithic, desperate, unavoidable sort of, you know, the inevitability of fate aspect that you really want to see if you can get the music to have. And it tells you something about what Anne Churl does in this piece, that this performance is 14 minutes long over. It's 2 minutes slower than Klemperer. And that's astonishing. It's astonishing. I mean, really, Klemperer is not actually notably slow, but he's granitic, he's grave, he's measured, he's sober. But this is fate itself, this performance. And I want you to hear a little bit of it. Just listen to the opening. Just the opening 30 seconds or so, and you'll see exactly what I mean. My God, the way they grind it out. It's terrifying. Listen. So there you go. That is a tragic overture, my friends. An unbelievable tragic overture. And so, Anne Churl, for me, is the guy for the tragic overture. I mean, whether it's on my ideal list or my favorite list, there are other great performances of the tragic overture, no question about it. But for the extreme tragic overture experience, Anne Churl is your guy. And that is the ideal list of Brahms Symphonies, Serenades, Variations, Overtures, all of the orchestral works that matter, except for the concertos. And I also didn't do the Hungarian dances because he only orchestrated a few of them. There are some other little things there. We're going to be talking about Brahms a lot in the future anyway, but I wanted to get this list out there because you've been responding so well to these chats about, the ideal stuff, and we've been having such a good time going back and forth. So I wanted to offer this opportunity to talk about not just the four symphonies, but these other pieces as well. And as I said, many of them may be the subject of future conversations, but for now, we have our ideal list, and I leave it to you to give me your ideal list as well. Thank you so much. Keep on listening, folks. All the best.